Okay, Colossians 2 basically finished up with the idea of not, well, not, let me rephrase this in my head. I caught myself before it got out my mouth. It has to do with the fact that we can't sin enough to not be saved, nor can we do anything to make God love us any more than he already does. His love is 100% complete. Okay, people have often told me, you say that because you want to sin. Well, then we might as well throw Colossians 3 out the window. Just be done with it. Because that's what it's all about. Now we're getting into what happens, what kind of a consequence is there. It's not okay to sin. I'll never agree with anybody who says it is. And this is actually really applicable to our world today. Because the world is telling us over and over and over that it in fact is okay to sin. Here's a little side note. Olympia, Washington, the capital, of course, of Washington. For the Capitol building, they got a transgender flag to fly this month. And they went around and painted all of the crosswalks with transgender flag colors to support and celebrate that. Google.
What happened in God We Trust?
Huh?
What happened in God We Trust?
It's not there. They have their own God, Ruby. They have their own God. Google put up a thing that said supporting and honoring transgender in July, something like that. So I wrote them a little note as I looked until I found a thing that said something about making contact with them, and you could click on it, and I did. And so while I was looking at this, I thought, I'll never, this is what I wrote to them, I'll never support it, I'll never honor it. The people are fine, I have nothing to say bad about the people, the sin is what's wrong. And I said, I will never support it. And then I asked a simple question, why are you so straight phobic? There's one that you can use. They want to call me transphobic, they want to call me homophobic, they want to call me all these other things. I'm going to start calling them straight phobic. And if they don't like it, tough. That's what they are. All I'm getting at with this is there is a pile of sin that we're expected not just to be okay with, but to promote. We're expected as people in the United States of America to promote sin. And in doing so, to defame and destroy Christianity. That's the goal of Americans as a whole. I'm not talking about every single American. I'm talking about as a whole. There's a group of them. The majority of them want sin. And all of us stupid Christians are getting in the way of that sin. And so let's get them out of the way. And if you don't think persecution is coming, you got something wrong with you.
Did they answer you?
Huh? No, they said they would, but they never did.
I just heard this last week in Nigeria, 90% of the Christians have been slaughtered, burned, killed in one way or another.
Yep.
Pastors with their heads cut off.
In Nigeria.
Yeah, 90%.
What about?
That's the world's worst right now.
What about China?
Apparently it's not as bad as Indo.
No, I know that, but it's bad. How about North Korea?
Russia?
Horrible places.
I don't think anybody knows about North Korea.
Well, North Korea is to such an extent that if you get caught with a Bible, you're going to die most likely. They will just obliterate you. They have no use for anybody who has anything doing Voice of the Martyrs had a thing about North Korea just, 2 weeks ago. Showing these beautiful Korean people that are being abused and destroyed because they have faith in Christ. And in China, the word was this. It was persecution. Not if, but when. Because it's coming.
There's still a minor persecution going on here in the United States, like the lady with the bakery and
Okay.
the Duck Dynasty people, and there's other people that have lost their jobs or their TV shows or different things just because they're Christian.
Well, and this kind of stuff's going to go on and on and on and on and on. And it's not going to end. And it's going to get worse. And here's the reason why. Because they want us as Christians out of the way. Because we're a burr when it comes to their lifestyle that they want to live. Why? I mean, there's nothing else that they have in mind. Their agenda is clear. Okay, so let's get into this. This is the Christian stance. Now remember, last week we were looking at, I'm not going to have to work for my salvation, nor can I lose my salvation due to sin. And it almost sounds when I'm talking about that kind of thing, like, yeah, you can sin and it's okay. No, it's not okay. It says here in verse 1 of chapter 3, it says, if you then were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Okay, let's stop with that for a second. What does it mean if you were raised with Christ? Well, go back to verse 20 of the last chapter. Therefore, if you died with Christ from the basic principles of the world, why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourself to regulations? So if you've died with Christ, now it's saying if you've been raised with Christ. Can I stay dead in Christ? It's the opposite. I have now, present tense, and it'll always be this way. There'll never be a point in forever now that I don't have eternal life. Because sin is no longer the issue. Okay? But it says here, if you've been raised with Christ, if you then were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above. Now, what does that even mean? We sing songs, seek ye first the kingdom of God. That's right out of the Bible. What does it mean to seek God? Think on that for a second. You may have something going through your mind right now. How do you suppose maybe we have differing ideas about what it really means to seek God? You look like you have a thought to that regard, Pop. To seek God. Oh, okay. You're kind of perking up a little bit.
I'm just with you.
Okay. Diana.
I would say pray, read the Bible.
Okay, that's a good part of it. A huge part of it. To seek God is to go after Him with everything you got. When I'm seeking something, I don't just kind of play around with it.
I think we have an illustration of that this morning.
Okay.
Our daily breads were missing.
Okay. Yeah.
And Roberta went in and found them. She sought and she found.
Okay. And there's the idea of it right there. Jesus described it this way. And you'll know the portion of scripture of which I speak. He described it this way. There was a lady who lost a coin. And it was precious to her. And she stopped everything else and looked for it until she found it. There was a man whose son left. And he looked and looked and looked every day until he finally came back. Now, this is what that's the idea. There's one other one. You understand?
The
you
lamb.
get, huh?
The lamb of
Yeah. You get the idea with it. I don't want to spend all the morning describing this.
Compare it to the old miners with they would spend hours, I mean, more hours than people would work from sunup to sunset looking for that gold. And they went to the point where some of them went crazy.
What happens when we do this with God? And first off, how are we going to do this with God? To dig into His Word, to communicate with Him, to be part of Christianity, if you understand what I'm saying that way. To make it my life would be seeking God. If I have been raised with Christ, I'm supposed to seek those things which are above. Now, how does this compare to the idea of sin? If I'm seeking what's above, will I notice everything that's around me? Not necessarily. And that's the concept that I believe he's getting at with this. To lay aside everything that the world has to offer to focus on getting with God. How many of you read your Bible this week? How many of you read your Bible all week? Not this morning. Okay, well, you are now. Okay, well, we'll call it that. Okay, out of all that, did God show you anything out of His Word? Give me an example of something that God showed you out of His Word this week.
I forgot what I read before.
Okay. Yep. This is good. You're that's the kind of answers I like right there. They aren't the Sunday school answers. They're
Well,
the real answers.
Thursday, when we were doing our women's Bible study, Tommy was pointing out that the writers of Genesis, we know that Moses wrote it, but where did he get his information? And that's what she was pointing out to us.
Okay. Let me give you an example from my life. I struggle with certain things. There are problems that I deal with all the time. And I'm not talking about physical problems. That has nothing to do with it. I got the privilege of going to Crescent City this last couple of days. I got back yesterday. And I'll just be honest about it, there are some idiots on the road. They really are. They really are. Okay. Two motorhomes. Identical, of course. Both pulling an identical Jeep with a bicycle on the back of each one. And because there were corners, they were doing 20. And I'm not patient. I have reasons for it. I can't sit in a vehicle real long, and I already had been. There's things like that lend myself to doing things. Okay, and then they stopped traffic on Highway 199 because they were working on 197. Anybody who knows anything about flagging, you don't do it on a different road than you're working on, you do it on the road you're working on. I mean, this is kind of like a duh situation. Frustrations. Okay? Now, with my attitude such as it was for that period of time when I was going through these things, did I have a testimony? Mm-mm. There was a bit of conviction there. Okay? You know what that is? That's God telling me, now I've told you this before, stop it. Y'all have your own difficulties you deal with. And you know when you're doing something that isn't right. And I admittedly need to work on this in my life. I really do. I mean, it's not a joke. I need to work on it. Okay, but how do I get the answers to this? By looking in here. If I would look in here, I would do okay. David said it this way, your word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against you. Your word have I hid in my heart. That doesn't just mean memorize. You think Mary memorized what the angels, what Gabriel told her when he said that she kept all these things in her heart? No. Has nothing to do with memorizing it. There's one word that we use that we probably could apply most and foremost to this if we would just use it right, and that's we need to love it. We need to love God's word. Because if we do, we'll listen to it, we'll live by it, we'll do all these things that it says to do. And we'll do it willingly because we love God's word. And I think when we're doing something that we're not looking at seeking God, we're not seeking Him, we're not seeking the things which are above, we're seeking self. And we sin. Every time we do that, we're susceptible. And it goes back to that armor of God bit that we were looking at Sunday night. I can't have my full armor of God at the ready and be thinking of self. I can't do it. It will not happen. Set your mind, verse 2 says, on things above, not on things of the earth. Set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. What's on the earth?
King James says affection, not just mind.
Okay. Okay.
Love on God.
Yeah.
Or on things above.
What kind of things are on the earth? Sin. Let's be honest with it. The things that the world has to offer take us away from God, and if they take us away from God, it is sin. God classifies it this way. All unrighteousness is sin. Every bit of the unrighteousness is sin. And the world is not going to encourage you to righteousness. They will do everything but that, just like we were talking about previously. It's all about sin. The world requires sin. I don't have to sin. Well, there's going to come a time when you're either going to have to choose between sinning or your life. You watch. You watch. Maybe we won't be here for it. I don't know. But there's going to come a time when it's going to matter that much. Because the world requires that we sin. You know why? Because Jesus said it this way. You're of your father the devil, he said of these people. Man. Well, what a mean thing to say. Yeah, well, sometimes that's the way it is. I've been accused of being a pulpit bully. I've been accused of all these different things, and I don't care. I have people get mad at me all the time and don't stay. I've seen it right here in this church where numerous people have gotten mad and ran off because they didn't like what I had to say. And I don't care. No, what's it to me? I don't care. I would say it this way, prove me wrong. If you can show me from Scripture where I'm wrong, let's go with it. I can't even think of all the people that I've made mad right here. Another quick example, my videos get maybe a 16th or a 20th of the views that our church has on YouTube, because people don't want to hear what I have to say. Okay, that's neither. It's no big thing. It does. I'm not saying this to whine. What I'm saying is even in the church, there's people going, nope, I'm not putting up with that. How much more the world?
Yesterday,
If we,
yesterday, we were looking for something, a particular item in Grants Pass, and we couldn't find it. But I was noticing how many vape shops had popped up. And one of the places advertised that they had something that's called the Devil's Kiss. And this is what they're advertising. It's the Devil's
That's what they want. That's what they want, Ruby. I could go on with a lot of... I have pictures that I had hoped to use on my computer and show them to you of stuff like this. Horrible stuff. I won't, because I'm not here to glorify Satan. But understand, I mean, this is not a joke. And we're in a battle. And he says, set your mind on things above, not on things of the earth. Because everything the earth has to offer will kill you. Everything. I've heard Christians, so-called Christians lately, talking about the 7 deadly sins. I can't even imagine a Christian talking that way when the Bible clearly says the wages of sin is death. How many sins are deadly? All of them. Might we say they're without number? Okay. Verse 3. Verse 3. For you died. You died. How many of you have died already? If you haven't, you're not where you need to be. I'm not talking about I'm going to go out and kill you or nothing. But before God, if you haven't died already once, you're in bad shape. What has to die? The propensity to sin. I have to leave the life I lived behind. The only way to extricate that from me is to die. I can't do it another way. Does that mean I don't have any sinful nature? I'm going to say this, and I'll say it carefully, and then I'll come back and qualify it, okay? In a sense, yes, it means I have no sinful nature. Because in Christ, I don't have that. I don't have that. It doesn't mean I can't go out and choose to sin. But the bent to sin has been crucified. I no longer have to do what that life told me to do. Right now, I do what my life tells me to do. It's a life. Life, that's an L, not a W. I do what my life tells me to do. I eat, I sleep, I drink, mostly bubbly water, I admit that, but not plain water, which probably isn't quite as good for me, but I like it, so there. A lot of coffee, but nonetheless, I do these things that my life tells me to do. Why? Because if I don't have it, I'll die. Now I don't have to sin because that life has been crucified. It's, for all practical purposes, hung on the cross with Christ.
I think Galatians 2:20 fits right in there.
Of course, yes. I wish we could have time to go through the whole gamut of that idea because it's so big. I don't have to sin. The only way I cannot have to sin is if that propensity has died. It says right here, and this is God's word speaking, for you died. Is that not an emphatic? It is. You died. Seek those things which are above, because you died. You don't have to. I'll use it this way. When my body dies, it'll no longer need to eat. It'll no longer need to drink. It'll no longer need to sleep. Some would say it's the dirt nap, so maybe I'm sleeping for... I'm kidding with that. There's all these things that won't have to happen. They just won't. Why? Because it died. That's the same thing it's talking about here. I don't have to do any of these things anymore. I don't have to sin because I have died. It's no longer necessary. Now, because I live in this corrupted tent, so to speak, as Paul would have put it, I do sin. But I'm going to say this with all the emphasis I can. It's not because I have to, it's because I want to. What a horrible person. Well, yeah, I am. But so are you. So are you. If you sin and you've died, then you're just as horrible as I am if you sin. But see, that's where Christ comes into the picture. I can be positionally perfect before God by His blood, and now I don't have to worry about my salvation because I've died and have been buried and rose again with Christ. Now that doesn't mean I can go out and live however I want to live. If you can pull that out of this, you got something going for you that ain't right somehow. You can't do it. But what happens when we sin? Now I've damaged myself to where I can't, I get mad, I get bent, or I do something that's not right. Okay, we'll just put it that way. And first off, Satan's going to attack me with it. And I've lowered my shield to such an extent that I can get hit. And there's nothing to quench the fiery darts. But just like I was talking about Sunday night, a shield doesn't completely stop anything from coming through it, but it quenches all the fiery darts. They're not going to be fatal. They may poke your arm up a bit. You got your arm strapped right to it, and all these arrows are coming flying, and bam! And they stick to it. What are they doing? Just sticking in this little tiny bit? No, they're sticking in it. Well, they can still spear you in the arm, and it could hurt. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be fatal. They're no longer a severe threat. Now, that's the way it is with me. If I have been crucified with Christ and I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me, I can hold my shield up knowing that nothing can penetrate it that's going to completely do me in. Nothing. If my shield of faith was such that nothing could penetrate it, ever, then I'd never sin. Never. How do you sin when that's there? But being honest with myself, I have to say I do. Now, I've had people, a lot of Seventh-day Adventists will tell you, no, I absolutely don't sin anymore. And I say, well, I think you do. I really think you do. Or you have it to the other extreme where Catholics will say, well, I sinned, but I got it made right by the priest, so I'm good. I can sin all I want, and it doesn't matter because the priest will take care of it. I'll be absolved by a priest, and all will be well. Both ends of the spectrum, where God's saying you don't have to do it. All you got to do is seek those things which are above. That's it. You died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Is Christ hidden in God? In this sense, yes. He's completely engulfed in God. And here we're with him in that. So what are we? Completely engulfed in God. So why shouldn't we do this? Because we don't do the first part. When we don't do the first part, if we don't seek those things which are above, we're seeking the things that are down here. And if we're seeking the things that are down here, we're going to have the end result of sin in our life, because that's what it produces. It always will, always has, and that's just the way it is. And so we have this encouragement here not to do that. Can a Christian seek those things which are below? We do it all the time. We do it all the time. And so he's saying stop that and start doing what's right. Because you died and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Now here's our hope. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. In what? Glory. People say that means heaven. No, it doesn't. Every bit of the glory that's been given to Christ is accessible to us. Now let me clarify that, because there's people who are going to say things against that very readily. And I understand what you're saying, because people have misused that. I'm not going to be glorified in the sense that Christ is glorified because I can't die for anybody's sin. That's not what I'm talking about here. My righteousness before God is in Christ alone. When he appears, I will be glorified in that sense. That's why it says, when Christ who is our life appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. What a joy to know. I am going to look before the Father as though I'm clean, because he's going to say, no, I covered that with my blood. He's right here in my hand, and he's in your hand, talking to the Father. He's in your hand, and nothing can take us out of that. And that's forever and ever and ever and ever. I think of these people who have died, who know Christ, or knew Christ as a believer on this earth, and they've died. Their eyes closed in death. What do they see after that? I can't even imagine what it'd be like. And that kind of goes along with Scripture, where it says, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man, the things which God has prepared for those who love him. That's not earthly, people. Joel Osteen would say it's earthly. There's a lot of different ones like that would say it's earthly. No, it's not. No, it's not. If that's the case, go to North Korea and explain to them how they are supposed to be living the life of a king. Go to these African countries where they're slaughtering them in droves and tell them they're supposed to live the life of a king. They're royalty. And explain to them. That's a Western thought. It's not reality. And it's propagated by Satan himself. Verse 5 says, therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passions, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. There's a little list of things. It's not a great list, but it's a little list. Go to Galatians 5, you'll get a bunch more. Romans has a whole pile of things to put off. They're just all through the New Testament, but nonetheless, these are the things that we're supposed to not do. Well, I thought you said you could do that and still be saved. Yeah, you can. You really can. But you aren't going to have any type of a testimony. And if you're seeking the things which are above, you're going to look for opportunities and take them. as God gives them to lead others to that saving knowledge of Christ as well. Well, what if I can't do it? Yeah, you can. I do mine by lifestyle evangelism. That's what I've heard people say. I don't talk to people. I do mine by lifestyle evangelism. Okay, are you doing all of these? Those that say that, are you doing all, just this little list? How about uncleanness? Or passion? Or evil desires? How about idolatry? I knew a guy that had I don't know, I haven't seen him in many, many, many years, had a what I'd call an altar to people, to a particular sports person who's no longer even in sports, with all of his accomplishments and a picture of him and all this praiseworthy stuff that goes on. You call that not idolatry? I call it idolatry. I really do. I call it idolatry because that's your idol. Now, I've also seen as people bowed down to a Buddha, watched it happen, a golden Buddha in a business up in Kent, Washington. I've watched as it happened. I felt like interrupting it and I didn't. I don't know, maybe I should have. I don't know. These things go on. Because of these things, verse 6 says, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourself once walked when you lived in them. So what's that saying? We don't have to do it. We don't have to do it. Wouldn't it be neat if we could honestly say with all perfect honesty that we don't sin anymore? Is there anybody here that can say that? I struggle all the time. I'm guessing I'm kind of normal. My boss says I'm special. But what a joy to know that we can. If we would apply these things that he's talking about here to our life, then we wouldn't sin. Because I don't have to anymore. That sin and bent toward sin has been crucified. So I no longer need to do it. That has died. Just like when my body dies, I won't have to eat or drink or sleep or any of those things that I do. I don't have to do this. It's dead. It's dead. But I have this little bad habit of kind of resurrecting it from time to time. Paul did, and he said, because of that I die daily. But I love what he said. He said this, he said, those things that I don't want to do, I do. The things I do want to do, I don't. Who's going to save me from this? He says, I thank the Lord that it's in Christ Jesus. Who's going to save us from it? Him. But I got to get my priority on Him. The more that is, the less I'm going to have a problem with sinning. Well, you can't say that. You're human. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A person who truly does verse 1 and verse 2 doesn't have a problem so much with sin. And I'd guess there's probably people who sin a lot less than I do, and I probably sin a lot less than other people that are Christians. It's hard to say. I mean, there's people that are way better off at it than I am, and there's people that are not quite as good as I am. And I'm not saying that in a bragging way. I'm saying it that we're all at different levels in our walk with Christ that's going to initiate us to need to really work on these things. until such time when we can stand before Him and have Him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Because of these things, what do I got? 7 minutes? Okay. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming on the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived according to them. But now you yourselves are to put off all these things: anger, wrath, malice. Anger is probably a tough one for me, I have to admit. Blasphemy, not so big of a problem. Filthy language out of your mouth, not so big of a problem. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man and his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of Him who created him. Let's stop with that for a second. I know it's the middle of a sentence, but let's stop with it for a second. How is this even possible? If I put off the old man and his deeds with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of Him who created him, I'm putting on Christ. And I can't do that if I still indulge the world fully. These people that are absolutely living in sin, you have to stop and say, I wonder. And that goes back to a question that I've asked many times of many people. They say they're a Christian. Okay? Based on what? Based on what? Are you basing it on the fact that Christ died for your sins? Or are you basing it on the fact that you said a prayer? If I have to say a prayer to be saved, I don't think I'm probably saved. If I have to go forward in a tent revival, I know I'm not saved. I have no doubt I'm not. If that's what it requires, I didn't do that. But if it's putting my trust and faith in Christ and Christ alone for my salvation and all that God has to offer, then I can be saved. And so these people say, well, in Sunday school when I was a kid, I said the sinner's prayer. Well, I'm really happy for you, but I wonder, would anybody here classify Fred as a Christian? Probably not. But he came, he sat, he listened, and he raised his hand to be prayed for. I remember him doing it. And look at him. It's all in what Christ did, not what I can do. Okay, so who did Christ die for? Who did He make in His image and all this thing? Where there's neither Jew or Greek nor Jew, circumcised nor uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and in all. New Age movement, shut up. It's not Christ consciousness. It's not that everybody is just right in all that they're thinking and all this. That's not what that last verse means. That has nothing to do with it. Is Christ in the Jew if he comes to him by faith? Is he in the Gentile if he comes to him by faith? How about the slave? Yep, if he comes to him by faith. The free? Yeah, if he comes to him by faith. The barbarian? Yeah, if he comes to him by faith. The city slicker or Scythian? Yeah, if he comes to him by faith. We could go down this whole list. He's available to any who would accept him. And the work that he did on the cross, not what we can do. There's a verse that says this. It says, not by works of righteousness which we've done, but by His great mercy He saved us. Not by works of righteousness which we did. You know why? Because all of our righteousness is like filthy rags. Think of the dirtiest rag you could think of. That's it, only worse. We can't do anything. Our righteousness is putrid. But his isn't. And that's why it goes back to Christ died for my sins, according to the Scriptures, and he was buried and rose the third day, according to the Scriptures. And to prove it, he was seen by a whole pile of people. If you have names, go back and look at them in 1 Corinthians. If you really want to see who they are, go back and look, but I'm not going through them all. So what have we seen today? You and I have opportunity to be perfect because we choose to sin. We're not, at least on this earth. I talked about positional perfection earlier, and that I will always hold to. I'm not a Calvinist, and I'm not an Arminian who fight over this whole positional perfection type situation. That's not the point. That's not the point at all. But I know before God that my sins have been washed away. But before man, if I sin, I have really made it hard for me to convince them that they need Christ. Will I have things to answer for when I get to heaven? Yeah, I'm sure I will. But that's not the issue. The issue is, how am I going to live the Christian life and never be able to tell somebody about Christ because I can't stop sinning long enough to do it? You don't think they notice it? Go out and find out what a non-Christian thinks a Christian should do. They have a long list. And you know what? They're not wrong. And then they say, well, Christians are hypocrites. You bet. Why are you saying Christians are hypocrites? Because you see them sinning all the time. I have a niece, and mom and dad have a grandchild that is struggling with that very thought right there, and it's keeping her from accepting the work that Christ did on the cross, because there's so many that say they are and live completely differently. Horrible. Oh, that we would put these things into practice in our lives and stop living the way the world says to live and begin to do what God says. If you've been crucified with Christ and raised again, if you then were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sits at the right hand of God. That's all we got to do. Stop playing the game, stop acting Christian, and start doing what God says to do. That's all we got to do. And I know it's a sensation. It's kind of a sensational passage, but really it is what we need to do. I got to stop. Things are done. Watches are being investigated. That kind of thing. And so I probably better wrap this up. But I'm passionate about it because it's so important. Let's close. Lord, thank you for your love, your mercy, your grace, combining to such an extent that we might have real life in you. Thank you for what you're going to do in our lives. Help us to live what we've seen this morning. Help us to do what we've seen this morning. Help us to be the kind of people that you've called us to be, that we might be a minister to those around us. Thank you for it. In your name, amen.